about the potential of grazing cover crops here in Oklahoma. And as you can see in the title, I placed there a case study. Why I'm saying that? Because so far I have data just for 1 year of research. So I don't have anything there that's conclusive yet. So, but at the same time, I believe that from the last year, the data that I had collected and analyzed, we can take some lessons for who is gonna planning on have some cover crops and see the potential of grazing, or if there is some scientists there that are planning on also to pursue such a study. Sometimes you can learn with my own mistakes and things like that. So to start, I would like to start to just warm it up with a warm-up, and I just would like to talk about the benefits of grazing cover crop. I know, and I'm pretty sure that most of you already had listened to talks talking how cover crops are good and all the benefits that can bring to the soil, though. So I don't want to simply repeat that here, but add something else. So regardless how good cover crop is, what can happen if you add grazing there? So the benefits of that: first, grazing ensure nutrient recycling. In other words, when you have the cover crop and you keep all those residues at the top, the residue is still not nutrient available to the plants in the soil. Those residues need to be decomposed, and then that will be into the soil. And so we can improve soil health with it. When you graze, what happens is the animal will retain just a small portion of the nutrients, and he will return most of the residue or the forage that it eats, and he turn to the soil already decomposed, and this will be readily available to the next crop. So let's say that this can speed up a little bit the decomposition of the residue, if I can say that. Also, it can remove excessive no-till residue. Here in Oklahoma, we are planning on summer cover crops, and after pretty much we are going to have wheat most of the time. And some question that raised it up there is this: if you have too much residue and we want to seed wheat in that bunch of residue, this residue can be detrimental to the wheat. In other words, sometimes can bother the germination, can reduce the stand. So it may be the case of removing that excessive residue with grazing. And also increasing profit or alleviate costs by animal gain. What I'm trying to say here is, when we are putting a cover crop, and I have heard in different meetings that they say that's a low input crop, that we should not fertilize, we just should place the seed there. However, it's low input, but it is an input, and these need to be added in the equation. So what I'm trying to say here is, if with the grazing there, the producer can have some animal gain, and this animal gain can be some money back that he's having, so that can alleviate the costs of the seed and after the tractor that he was driving there. That's pretty much my idea on the benefits of those of grazing the cover crops. Now, what would be the issues? Well, that's in my opinion, there is an edge there where this is a cover crop or this is a summer forage, and it's even difficult to find a definition here. What is a cover crop per se? So I have listened from NRS personnel in presentations that they say that a cover crop, we should have at least 4,000 pounds of residue per acre to have a good cover crop. Sometime I heard even they decrease a little bit and they say 3,000 pounds per acre. In my opinion, and that is just my opinion, I would say I prefer not to think on how much biomass we have at the top, but how much that biomass is covering the soil. So I would think that, in my opinion, and that's just my educated guess for now, that if you make sure that we have 90 to 100% of ground cover there left after grazing, if you think on grazing the cover crop, we would keep most of the benefits of our cover crop, such as decreased soil moisture losses, decreased soil compaction, and year after year, we can be increasing soil health. Of course, it may take a little longer than a cover crop per se, but we still can hold some of the benefits. And for we achieve this 90 to 100%, pretty much what we need is to use a light or moderating stocking rate when we are grazing. And just a parallel that I'm going to do here with when we talk about forage. As a forage guy here, of course, I need to talk a little bit about the forage background. When you talk about light to moderate stocking rate for cover crops, grazing cover crops, that's not too much different when you think about just for forage. For instance, I'm just showing this graph here. As you can see on the y-axis, we have the animal output, how much gain you can have it. And in the x-axis, the stocking rate, how many animals you're going to have. So if you think the gain per animal, so just one animal, okay? If you have, let's say, just one animal in the field, and is a big pasture, let's say we are very light stocking rate, just one animal, what happened? That animal can select everything that it's going to have there, right? So that animal can get as fat as it wants. And as we go increasing the number of animals, they still can, all of them get a good gain, but when you pass from moderate and start to get heavier, those animals is going to start to compete for forage, and the gain of all of them is going to start to decrease because they're competing now for food and we don't have enough for them. Now, if you don't think about the gain per each animal, but we think about the gain per area, for how, regardless the number of animals that we have in that area. The gain per acre will actually increase. So as we increase the number of animals in the beginning, the gain will increase with it. However, when we pass to moderate to heavy, the animals is going to start to compete for food, and so it's going to start to have a decrease in the gain even per acre. So now here you are seeing, if you think the gain per animal would be good to go very light. If you think about the gain per acre, we're supposed to go moderate or heavy. So where are we supposed to focus here? In the end of the day, none of those two. We're supposed to be focusing on the net return. And the net return is going to be exactly between light and moderate, right? That's pretty much what I'm proposing here with cover crops. If you go light, moderate, keep about 9% to 100% cover, we might be still having the benefits as cover crop. Now look at this graph and see something. So far, what I had said here, high, very light, heavy. I mean, that's not too much informative, right? It's very, so what we need here is to fill it up, those letters with numbers for the different cover crops that we have there. So it's my final objective is exactly for each cover crop to really find what is this light to moderate where we can still have the benefits of a cover crop. This study that I'm going to present now is just a pilot study, is the first one. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to learn lots from it, and from there I can expand for other studies, and I hope that in some years from now I'm going to start to have this kind of information, the numbers for this graph for those different cover crops. So what I'm showing here is pretty much the layout of the research, and as you can see, I had those plots in two locations, in Chickasha and Perkins in Oklahoma. One that's more southwest, the other one is more central north. So what happened here is, as you can see, I have 4 replications, and in each replication I have main plots, and the main plots were different summer cover crops during the summer, of course. And we had here 3 grasses, pearl millet, triple thread sorghum Sudan, and also sorghum Sudan. 3 legumes, that is mung beans, forage soybeans, and cowpeas. And 2 mixes, very simple mixes. I didn't go with multi-species, just 2 species at all. One is triple threat sorghum Sudan and cowpeas, and the other one is pearl millets and mung beans. And of course, for control, we have fallow. That's pretty much what happened here in Oklahoma, most of the case. And after the summer cover crop, we terminate the cover crop and we plant the wheat during fall, and we just produce wheat for grain purposes only. Why I didn't do grazing on the wheat, dual purpose wheat? Because I'm afraid that that we are going to have 2 things here: the cover crop effect in the wheat and also the grazing effect in the wheat grain. So once I want to know exactly the effect of the cover crops, I don't want to have this confounded variable there. That's why I keep just for grain. And what I did is, in each one of those cover crop plots, I had 3 different simulated grazing. As I mentioned, this is a pilot study. We start small and we go expanding, and everybody knows cattle is expensive, and to do a grazing study takes also lots of land. So once it's very difficult to start with this, I just do simulated grazing, that we use the cutter harvester to cut that material, simulating the grazing on different stubble heights. So the one was exactly what I call here severe cut, but understand the severe cut as we use those cover crops actually as a summer forage. We just let the animal graze close to the ground. So we are not going to have cover after. The other one that I call here proper cut, imagine that is a graze cover. In other words, we are going to let the animal graze, but we are going to try to cut in such a height that we still keep that 90 to 100% cover. And the check, that's no cutting, no simulated grazing. What that means, we just let it grow as purely cover crop, let it mature and everything. So that's pretty much the idea here. I really like to show this picture even before I start to talk on more details. As you can see here, this picture was taken in Perkins when we are placing the cover crops last year. And as you can see, look at the weather. I was talking to my student here, he was just dropping the seeds, and I say, Kyle, let's speed it up, because if we need to finish, get this done before the rain comes. What I'm saying that, keep in mind that everything that I'm going to discuss here, we're talking on a wet year. Last year, the rain came all the time in the right time, both locations. So everything that you are going to see there, keep in mind, water was never a limitation. And for Oklahoma here, some years the summer can get pretty dry, and we really don't know the results of those cover crops on a different environment yet, at least from the research that I have done. So here, our timeline. So what we did, right? So last year, 2016, late June, we plant the cover crop. After 6 weeks, we get a good height that would be ideal for grazing in both locations. So we did the simulated grazing. As you can see here, in each plot, we have the 3 sub-treatments here. You can see that we have a cut that is pretty much keeping 9 to 100% cover, ones that close to the ground, and purely cover crop. After we let regrow, and we terminate with glyphosate by mid of September. Then after 3 weeks, we plant the wheat in an no-till way. And of course, we did the best managements on wheat, and we harvest them late May of this year. And after 1 week, we plant the cover crop, but differently from the first year that we planted in a disked and very clean soil, we planted straight in the stubble. And so the cover crop start to come up this year back. And here we are discussing the results that I have. Most of the results that I'm going to discuss today are going to stop exactly on the wheat yield of last year. So far, I am not discussing anything from the cover crop of this year. So, first thing that I collected, remember that I told that we plant the cover crop, and after 6 weeks, we see that it was time to do the simulated grazing. So, before we go there and do the simulated grazing in the same day, I took my students and say, let's get quadrats, and randomly in each main plot, let's take subsamples. Samples, we clip everything that we have inside of the quadrats, let's dry and separate what is really cover crop and what is weeds, let's say. Plants that appears there that we didn't seed it. And this is the result for Perkins. You can see the 3 first ones are the legumes crop. And I'm just turn my cell phone off here. All right. So the 3 first ones are the legumes, and the 3 next ones are the grasses, and then it comes the mixes. And all graphs will keep exactly this standard. The part that's in green is what was cover crop, and the part that is in red is the weed. So as you can see here, I did a kind of a half species composition here. What is cover crop and what is weeds. Perkins was a location that I selected because it's a very sand loam soil, and also it has a high incidence of weeds. So it's a soil that's very poor in fertility, and we have lots of weeds coming. On Chickasha, at the other location, it's more a clay loam soil, a little higher in fertility, and we have low incidence of weeds. So as you can see, I took 2 different contrasting locations. Why I did that? Because I really want to see those cover crops behaving in 2 extremes environments, or the 2 extremes soil types and weed conditions that I could find around here. So keep in mind, Perkins, low fertility, lots of weeds, high weed pressure. You can see that the legumes here didn't do pretty well at all. Forage soybeans, 7% that came was weed, and 30% only was the cover crop. Cowpeas and mung beans, 40% is about weed. Now, when we move to the grasses, pearl millet, sorghum Sudan, and triple thread, the pearl millet didn't do pretty well. 30% was weed. When you talk about sorghum Sudan and triple thread, we can see that they could handle better, but I'll say not ideal. In my opinion, 15 to 13% weed is still a little high. When you talk about the mixes, again, it's about 15%, 17%. I don't believe that they did a good job on controlling, on choking the weeds down. Now, look what happened when we move to Chickasha. It's a completely different deal. You can see here that now the legumes, they did a better job. Looks like that the cowpeas didn't take too much advantage of that high fertility, and 25% that we have there was still weeds. But forage soybeans here and mung beans, look, we have 70% and 8% that was weeds. In my opinion, for a legume, it's a fair job on choking weeds. Now, what's great, what the mixes and also what the grasses did. You can see that we really have a good control of those weeds. So what I'm showing that here, what I'm trying to show so far is that, yes, the cover crops can control weeds, can help us decreasing weeds in our fields. Yes, but not all the time. And even though depend on the type of the cover crop that you're gonna have there, the fertility of our soil, and also in which kind of weed pressure you're starting there. In other words, they don't do any miracle here. They are just plants that sometimes need a good fertility to grow. Some pictures. This is the triple treat sorghum Sudan. This is my student Kyle. You can see in Perkins. This is the day, right? The day that we did the simulated grazing. That was before doing that. At the same day that you took the species compositions to see how much weed we have there. You can see here in Perkins that the triple treat is about 3 feet, 3.5 feet. And look down below here, lots of weeds are coming. Well, I'm saying weeds for simplicity because what we get here was pretty much a stand of crabgrass that was in that field. That field has a high incidence of crabgrass. Again, I don't know how much we can say crabgrass is a weed here because crabgrass can be presented as a cover crop also. And at the same time, crabgrass can be used for grazing. I'm calling weed because in my research, in that moment, I was not expecting the crabgrass. It's not the desirable one. But as you can see, in a low fertility soil, look how the triple treat sorghum Sudan really grow low, and also its stage that was a little earlier. And look in Chicache where we have it, a higher fertility soil and a low pressure of weeds. We have that that same plant coming faster and producing more biomass. So as you can see in Perkins, we produced about 3 tons and a half, 3,500 pounds of biomass, of residue, of cover crop or forage, whatever you want to call here, only. Now, at the same time in Chicache, we have about 6,000 pounds. Now, I just would like to remember, the NRCS mentioned that for we consider that a cover crop, we need to keep at least a residue of 3,000 pounds per acre. So as you can see, 3,000 pounds per acre of triple treat sorghum Sudan is all that. We are talking about a 3 feet tall plant or even higher. And you can see that in Perkins is exactly the time that we're supposed to be putting them for grazing. Now what happened here is on Chicache, when we did the simulated grazing, was a little late. But why? We wanted to do, and our plan was to do the simulated grazing in the same day. So what happened here is we were waiting for Perkins to catch up in the minimum height or closer to where people is going to put for simulated grazing. And at that time, Chicache just get too much biomass. So just keep in mind as I turn a little bit when I talk about the NRCS. Look, this is a lot of biomass. And also, I'm pretty sure that when we were 3 feet at Chicache, that was the time to correctly put to graze here, we also would have about 3,000 pounds per acre. So in this case, if you follow that, there is not much room for grazing there. So that's why I'm going with the idea that if we keep around 100% cover, 90 to 100% cover would be a good guess, educated guess to at least to have some benefits of the cover crops. So this is the cowpeas representing our legumes. Look at Perkins. You can see here that you can see more crabgrass there than the cowpeas per se. Now in Chicache, we can see more of the cowpeas. However, we also have a good amount of weeds there. We have big weeds, stinking grass, and some plantains coming up. As you can see, the legumes looks like not to do a fair job on choking weeds. So just to summarize that on the weeds. So one of the cover crop benefits that's mentioned is exactly suppress weeds so we can reduce the need for herbicides and other pesticides. And according so far what I'm learning from my research, it will depend. First, we need to think about our cover crop type, right? So if you have a grass, looks like that the grass has a better chance to outcompete the weed. If you have a legume, looks like the legume will have a hard time to choking the weeds. Weed pressure, remember what I mentioned to you. In Perkins, we had a high weed pressure, and in Chickasha, we have a low weed pressure. And that really accounts how different those grasses, especially, could do a better job in Chickasha because the pressure was lower. Soil type and fertility. Well, let me tell you something here. There is a reason why we select those plants as cover crop, because they can produce lots of residues and cover the soil fast, right? And they produce lots of biomass. And there is no miracle, all right? If you want a plant that's going to produce lots of biomass, it will take more from your soil. It will demand more nutrients, regardless. So what I'm saying here is we need to have a minimum fertility there. Sometimes I hear that cover crops are low inputs. We suppose not actually to spend on fertilizer or herbicides before introducing the cover crops, because it's supposed to handle that. Again, depending on the type of soil that you have there, you will need some fertilization, and sometimes you need to apply some herbicide to put those weeds a little down before we introduce your cover crop. Unfortunately, there is no miracle here, is what I am seeing. Now let's move. So we finished with the deal with the weeds. We went there and we did the simulated grazing. And I just want to discuss a little better what we did here. So we cut it every main plot. We have 3 subplots within. That was exactly our simulated grazing. So here you can see that we have purely cover crop. In other words, we are not cutting. We are just keeping growing as much as it can. We have severe, where we cut it about 3 inches. Why 3 inches? Because mainly this is the lowest that we recommend for a grass when you talk about them as a summer forage. Because they have a little regrowth, and after we can introduce the cattle back, we need to have at least a little bit of the stem there, because it's where some of the reserves for the regrowth will be. So we need to keep at least 3 inches. So we obey and we keep 3 inches. But as you can see, we don't have a good cover there. The soil is not covered at all. Now proper, I come in and say, let's do 6 inches. And after that I cut, I just learned that actually I'm supposed to be a little higher. I'm supposed to be about 8 inches to cut. When you cut at 6 inches, you are not 90 to 100% cover. We are about 80 to 85% cover. But what happened is, as I mentioned, it was a very wet year, and after 3-4 days, that was back to 100%. So I don't think that we have too many losses of water or any other problems for have this 85% cover for 2-3 days. The same we did with the legumes, and I'm sorry for this picture. I didn't take that in the best angle. It looks like that the cover crop subplot is larger than the others, and that's not true. I am not a good photographer. That's everything that this picture shows. Trust me, those subplots, they have the same, is the same width and length. So as you can see here on the legumes, the proper, I cut it, I simulated grazing at a 3 inches height. Why I went a little lower? First, legumes start to have leaves closer to the ground. So as you can see there, we have a cover about 90% when you go 3 inches. Second, the legumes, they don't have reserves at the above ground biomass. They have more in the roots. So also we can go a little lower. So that's our proper. The cover crop, we didn't touch. And the severe, we really go pretty low, 1 inch. Even we try to scalp, like we let it go as much as the cattle could take it. So, and let me just anticipate that to you. In the severe, most of the time in both locations, the cover crop try to return, but the weeds just choke them because they will grow back pretty slow. Especially when I'm talking about the severe on legumes, all right? So this is the data from those plots. As you can see here, I don't have data for the cover crop because so far we didn't harvest anything. They're still growing, right? We have for each one of the cover crops and mixes, we have proper and severe. Proper in green, that's pretty much where we try to keep 90% cover at least, and the severe, where we try to use that as a forage summer. In the y-axis, we have the dry yield and pounds per acre, and the values that we have in the top here is pretty much animal unit month, pretty much our stocking rate. How many animals weighing 1,000 pounds we could keep in 1 acre with this cover crop by the time of 1 month. So, and this is data from Perkins, all right? You can see when you talk about the legumes, well, there are not much animals that we can place there, even when we go as purely a forage. You can see that the highest was mung beans that we can put about 1.5 animal per month there. Now, when you go down and do a proper, where we keep a good cover in the soil, you can see that sometimes we can reach just 1 animal every 2 acres. So I don't know how much gain and how much profit we can take from that. Now, when we talk about the grasses, it's a little better. You can see that when you use them as strictly as a forage, we can go with the triple threat Southern Sudan on 3 animals units per month. Now, when we go and you try to keep the cover, that reduce about 1 animal per acre. And I would say that the mixes had an intermediate production of biomass and also how much it could carry. I need to say that we collected subsamples for forage quality analysis. However, we don't have that information still available to us. My student is finishing doing all the analysis and everything, and I hope very soon to have this information available. Now, when you go to Chickasha, we can see that we have a huge bump, especially in the grasses. Now you can see that on the per millet, the Southern Sudan and triple threat, when we go proper and we keep a good cover there, at least 90%, you can see that we are talking about 3 animals per acre. It's a good amount of animals. Now, when you talk about the legumes, you can see that we didn't have any improvement. Look like that the legumes didn't take too much advantage of that high fertility that we had in Chickasha. Now, something that I would mention here is for both locations, I did all the statistical analysis, but I mean, I think that what I want to pass here is the main message. And regardless if it's a legume or if it's a grass, if you want to move from a summer cover crop only that you are going and letting graze close to the ground based on our simulated grazing, and you want to go to a graze cover, as I like to say, where you're keeping a good cover, at least we try to keep 90%, what you need to do is to reduce your stocking rate in about 30%. So if you reduce your stocking rate by 30%, you may still keep that 90% cover in your soil that may still keep some of the benefits of the cover crop. Now, I'm just putting those 2 graphs together in the same slide because I want to show that. Look how curious that was. In Perkins, when you talk about the legumes, looks like that in Perkins, the legumes did pretty much better than in Chickasha, right? Well, not exactly. I just wanted to remember that what we had in Perkins was a high pressure of weed. So as you can see, and you just compare the green portion of those bars for the legumes, we have about the same biomass of legume, of forage coming in both locations. What came more actually was weeds. So I don't have the forage quality data available yet, as I mentioned, but I am very confident that what happened is in Chicaché, from those plots, we are going to have a higher quality because they're going to have more legume in that mix that it becomes with the weeds. So, and also when we have the forage quality analysis, we can think on doing some calculations for gain. So far we are talking how many animals you can place there, but we cannot do any discussion so far in gain. So in future we would like to have some information in gain and also some economics on it. But it is still too early for we do any conclusion or do any discussion on those two parameters. Now, remember, we cut it and we let them regrow for 8 weeks, and after we terminate with glyphosate. This data is exactly before we terminate with glyphosate. The day that we went there to spray and terminate with glyphosate, we went there and throw quadrats inside of each subplot, and we did an estimation of how much residue we had produced there. Not residue yet, because we didn't terminate it, but how much biomass, let's say, we had produced there. And remember, as I told you, it was a very wet year. So the rain came all the time. So what happened is on Perkins, you can see that we have a good regrowth regardless if we do the proper or a severe grazing there. Even sometimes they catch up. The cover crop that now I add the cover crop here because we have data for cover crop here that was not grazed in gray. Sometimes even different. So there are no significant differences at all. In other words, in this case, it was very curious. If you are pretty close to the ground, or if you go and keep purely cover crop in the end, the amount of total residue was not significantly different. Now remember, when you talk about the legumes, I didn't have a graph for this data, but I have this data that I was crunching yesterday. For the legumes, we have a high percentage of weeds there, okay? So we didn't do a good job of controlling the weeds. Differently from the grasses and the mixes where the residue that we have there, the biomass that we have there is mainly cover crop. In Chicaché, pretty much the same. The only thing is we get higher yield for the grasses and the mixes because we have a higher fertility soil there, so those plants could regrow and produce more biomass comparing to Perkins. Now I'm just showing here the rainfall from Chicaché versus Perkins. Chicaché in green and Perkins in red. As you can see, the cumulative rainfall for both locations were about the same, and the distribution of this rain were about the same. Even in a better graph, look how we were pretty good on water last year. We planted the cover crop and came 4 inches of water and quite well distributed. And so past 6 weeks, and we did the simulated grazing. After it, it came 5 inches of rain during the time that those cover crops was regrowing. And then we do the cover crop termination, right? After the cover crop termination, we had 3 weeks, and during these 3 weeks came about 3 inches of water in both locations. So we still have a replenish of water for we seeded the wheat. Because something that I would like to discuss if no water comes here is how the emergence of the wheat is going to be better with those different plots comparing to the fallow. like would have a better germination of the wheat or not. We don't have any differences at all. So as I'm showing here right now, this is the triple treat sorghum Sudan that was terminated by applying glyphosate. This is Chicaché, and as you can see, we have a very good ground cover there. You see that the soil is pretty well protected. Now look at the legumes, and I'm showing here the mung beans. And this is a kind of a pattern for all the legumes, even when we talk about the ones that was purely cover crop. What happened is, applying the glyphosate, the leaves will melt. That's pretty much what, to be very simple in the way that I say. The leaves will melt, they are very fragile, and they will blow with the wind, and we are not going to have a good cover for those 2 to 3 weeks that we left there before putting the wheat. So that's something that you may consider when thinking about legumes as a cover crop. Now, in mid-October, after 3 weeks of termination, we went there and we seeded the wheat, no till, and this is the wheat coming on December 9. Again, we get 3 inches of water, even more when we reach December. And as you can see, they're coming pretty well. You can see the residues here, pretty much of the grasses and the mixes. And what happened is, when you look to the yield of the wheat this year, when we harvest in May, you can see that there were no significant differences on those plots that we did the proper grazing, that we keep it a good cover, from the severe that we consider just as forage, and the cover only. The data is all around. What I would like to say, there are no significant differences there. The only thing that I saw here that I would like to emphasize is in Chicaché, you can see that most of the time the cover only, that was the one that we never grazed. It looks like that numerically we had higher yields, but that was not confirmed on Perkins. And also, those are numerical differences. When you run the statistics, they are not significant different at all. So what I'm saying here is, we had a wet year, and looks like if you have a wet year, and especially we have a decent fertility in your soil, doesn't matter, those cover crops, especially the grasses, can catch up even when we have a severe grazing. Now, the problem when you do a grazing close to the ground is, after the grazing, you're going to have at least 1 week to 10 days that soil is not going to be covered. So you can have some detrimental effects in your soil during that time, even though the water will come. So that's pretty much what I would like to talk about the research that I had done so far. Again, I'm not doing any conclusions here. That is just what I have seen so far from that research. And what I would like is really to open to discussion. As I mentioned, this is a pilot study. I'm trying to come with data, and I would like to hear from you and tell me what do you think that I should add here? What do you think that I should do differently for future studies? But before that, I just want to do a little promotion here of an app that I had developed with the help of the Grazing Cap. So this is the Graze OK app. That's pretty much, I think that some of you are a little familiar with the grazing stick, that you can go to your field and you can go there and measure your plant height, canopy cover, and you need to do all the calculations by hand to know how much forage you have available in your pasture, and also need to calculate by hand how many animals you can introduce there. So the Graze OK app is just a bypass. You input all the height and the cover in the app, you describe your pasture, and they do all the calculations for you. So you can download for free. on Google Play or App Store. And after you open the app, first screen, you can exactly put your forage height and your canopy cover. And after, when you get a minimum amount of readings for that specific field, the cells will turn yellow. And when you have a very good amount of readings, the cells will turn green. So at that moment, you hit next, and then comes the second screen where you're supposed to describe your pasture. So as you can see, you need to talk the type of pasture that you have there, the type of forage. You're gonna put on red there what would be the right stubble height that you're supposed to keep there, but I let to you to choose how much stubble height you want to leave there. Your type of livestock or number of animals that you're going to place, or how many days you want to keep your herd in your field. And as you can see, everything comes on drop-down menus, pretty easy to use it. And after that, you really describe all your pasture. You just hit submit, and all the information comes to you. If appears some of the red cells, for instance here, means that something's critical there, because according to the amount of animals that you want to place there, in this example, you're not leaving a good amount of rest days for each one of your sub-pastures. So in this case, you can just hit back, change the number of animals, resubmit, and so when you really find a good tune for that pasture specific for your system, you can just email this information to yourself or to the person that's going to be really putting the cattle there and doing the management. As you can see, it's a very simple concept. We are just trying to make people's life easier with this app. So that's everything that I would like to talk today. I have also the OSU Forage System YouTube page, where you have videos there. You can find the tutorial for the Graze OK app. Also, I talk about Johnson grass control in pastures, about musky thistle control, and I'm coming with other videos in future. Please, if you're interested, go there, take a look, subscribe, and let me know which kind of videos or information you would like to see there in future. So from that, I would like to open for questions. Amber?
Yes. Okay. Sorry. It took me a little bit to unmute my mic here. So I can, do you want me to read the questions or do you want to read the questions? Either way.
I am not finding the questions here.
Okay. Okay. So we have a question that was, what was, and you might have covered this. I'm trying to remember when it happened during the webinar. It was, what was the reason for the low fertility in Perkins?
The reason? Well, it was a sand soil, and also that field was already 2 years that was just fallow, and the crabgrass were coming aggressively. But before that, they have planted wheat there for several years, and the field was a little neglected, like they were not doing the right fertilization. So it was wheat for some period of time. After they leave fallow for some years, and so the crabgrass just took over.
Oh, okay. And then the next question is, any actual numbers of the increase in soil moisture and the decrease in runoff? Or did you, basically, it's also any measurements on the decrease in the loss of topsoil with runoff or sediment in the runoff? Do you have any measures on any of those things in terms of the value of the cover crops? I think
runoff, we didn't do any measurement on runoff. Let me tell you that those fields are very, like there is no steepness there. So I don't believe that we're going to have too much runoff there. But we have taken soil moisture data, and I have all this data there. But what happened is, as I mentioned, was a very wet year, and what you want to see with those soil moisture data is exactly how the profile down to 1 meter will change. Even we will overkill a little bit. would change on those different cover crops in interaction with those different cuts. But again, the water came all the time, and all the time the soil was replenished with water, so we don't see any differences. So once there is nothing to discuss there, I just left the data out and focus more on the weed, because it's something that we see something that I could take, like that we could learn from. Now this year, let me tell that, we are having a different story, a completely different story. First, on Perkins, our cover crops completely failed. Came the rain and we planted, but we planted on the stubble, and also the weeds were starting to come. I had the intuition that I need to apply some herbicide there before putting the seed to choke those weeds down. But I hold myself, because when we talk about cover crop, they say it's low input, and those cover crops supposed to handle the weeds, and they didn't. What we get there was a huge stand of crabgrass. Some grasses, cover crops from triple treat sorghum Sudan came up, but pretty minor. So what we did actually, beginning of this week, was to apply glyphosate and other herbicides to put all the weed down, and we are going to reseed the cover crop in Perkins. Well, sounds crazy, right? Because rain's not coming here. Well, we have irrigation there, so I will irrigate. It's not ideal because nobody's going to do that as a cover crop, but I mean, I learned a lesson, and I have that to show that sometimes in a low fertility soil, as you can see, just the cover crop will not do the work. Now in Chicaché, also, we had a better stand of cover crops, but once we plant on the stubble and the weeds were coming, we didn't disc. I can say, in my opinion, that cover crop came a little bit, but is a failure also. But in Chicaché, we don't have how to irrigate. So in this case, we are going to let them go, and we are going to have mostly weeds. So that's something that I want to have more species composition, more data before discussing that. But that's what we are seeing this year, because after the replant, after the rain, no rain came anymore. And so those cover crops could not grow. And the weeds that are adapted to this location, they could grow and take that over.